Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The air inside the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church on Calhoun Street in Charleston was thick with the gentle quiet of a midweek evening. It was Wednesday, June 17, 2015, a warm and humid day giving way to a balmy southern night. For the small group gathered in the church's fellowship hall, this was a familiar ritual, a sanctuary within a sanctuary. This was Bible study night at Mother Emmanuel, a cornerstone of the congregation's week, a time for fellowship, for questioning, for seeking solace and understanding in Scripture. The church itself was more than just a building. It was a living monument, a vessel of Black history and resilience, born from defiance in the age of slavery, burned and rebuilt, a steadfast sentinel through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and the Civil Rights Movement. Its pastor, the Reverend Clementa C. Pinckney, was a man who embodied that legacy. A state senator and a spiritual leader, his voice a force for justice both in the State House and from the pulpit. That evening, the lesson was from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, the parable of the sower. As Reverend Pinckney guided the discussion, a slight, pale young man with a bowl-style haircut slipped into the room and sat down. He was a stranger, but in a place like Mother Emmanuel, a stranger was simply a future friend. They handed him a Bible and a study sheet, and for the better part of an hour he listened. He sat with the 12 men and women who had come to share their faith. He sat with 87-year-old Susie Jackson, a church trustee and family matriarch. He sat with 74-year-old Ethel Lance, a sexton who had served the church for over 3 decades. He sat with Cynthia Hurd, a librarian, and Tywanza Sanders, a recent college graduate. He sat among them, a silent, unassuming presence in a room filled with warmth and welcome. And then, as the study concluded and the attendees bowed their heads for a final prayer, their eyes closed in reverence, the quiet was broken. The stranger stood up. The air, once filled with gentle contemplation, was suddenly pierced by the metallic click of a Glock pistol and the cold finality of his words. The act of terror he was about to commit was meticulously planned, an attack on a symbol, design. To be a catalyst. He believed it would be the first shot in a new war. He was wrong. Today, on Anatomy of Crime, we dissect the anatomy of failed hate. We will explore a crime born from a digital echo chamber of white supremacy, an act of violence aimed at the heart of Black history and faith. But more than that, we will examine its profound and paradoxical aftermath, a story in which a meticulously planned act of division resulted not in the race war its perpetrator craved, but in an astonishing, world-shaking display of grace, and a quiet, powerful revolution against the very symbols he held sacred. To understand the immense gravity of the crime, one must first understand the sanctity of the place where it occurred. The Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church is not just any church. It is affectionately known as Mother Emmanuel, the oldest AIM church in the American South, a hallowed institution with roots stretching back to the darkest days of slavery. It was founded in 1816, organized by Black worshipers fleeing the racism of Charleston's white Methodist congregations. Its very existence was an act of rebellion. One of its founders was Denmark Vesey, a formerly enslaved man who purchased his own freedom and would later plan one of the most extensive slave revolts in American history. Vesey's plot was discovered in 1822, and as retribution, Charleston authorities executed him and dozens of his co-conspirators. They also burned his church, Emmanuel AIM, to the ground. But the congregation did not die. It went underground, its members worshiping in secret until after the Civil War, when they formally reorganized and, in 1865, rebuilt their church. The structure that stands on Calhoun Street today, a magnificent Gothic Revival building, was completed in 1891. It stood as a testament to endurance, a symbol that its community could not be extinguished by fire or by hate. Through the long, brutal decades of Jim Crow, Mother Emanuel was a center for Black community organizing. It hosted Booker T. Washington and was a frequent stop for Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. During the civil rights struggles of the 1950s and 60s, to attack Mother Emanuel was to attack more than a building or a group of worshipers. It was to aim a weapon at the historical, cultural, and spiritual heart of Black America. It was a place chosen for its power, its history, and its symbolism. The killer knew exactly what he was doing. The man who walked into that church was Dylann Storm Roof. At 21 years old, he was an aimless drifter, a high school dropout with no job and few friends, floating between the homes of his divorced parents in rural South Carolina. To those who knew him casually, he was quiet, unassuming, a ghost in his own life. But online, in the dark, insulated corners of the internet, he had been meticulously constructing a new identity. He was building himself into a soldier, a self-appointed martyr for a cause he believed was righteous and urgent. His radicalization, according to his own writings, began with the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin in Florida and the subsequent trial of George Zimmerman. The case dominated the news, and Roof, seeking information, typed black-on-white crime into a search engine. The results he found did not lead him to mainstream news outlets or academic studies. Instead, he tumbled down a rabbit hole of white supremacist propaganda. He landed on the website of the Council of Conservative Citizens, a white nationalist organization that masquerades as a mainstream conservative group. There, he was inundated with distorted statistics and fabricated narratives, painting Black Americans as a violent, predatory threat to white society. This digital diet of racial hatred became his obsession. He spent hours consuming propaganda, his worldview warping with every click. He learned about the supposedly glorious histories of Rhodesia and apartheid-era South Africa, regimes he came to idealize. He adopted their symbols, sewing their flags onto his jacket. He created a website which he titled The Last Rhodesian to house his new belief system. The site was a chilling digital artifact, featuring a 2,500-word manifesto and dozens of photographs of himself. In the photos, he posed with a .45 caliber Glock pistol and burned an American flag. In others, he stood at historical slave plantations and Confederate cemeteries, a scowling tourist in the landscape of his own ideology. He posed repeatedly with the Confederate battle flag, a symbol he believed represented the fight to preserve white supremacy. His manifesto was a rambling, hate-filled text, riddled with racial slurs and pseudoscientific justifications for his bigotry against African Americans, Jews, Hispanics, and East Asians. It was a testament to the power of online echo chambers to transform alienation into violent extremism. "I have no choice," he wrote. "I am not in the position to alone go into the ghetto and fight. I chose Charleston because it is the most historic city in my state, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the country. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world, and I guess that has to be me." He had chosen his target, purchased his weapon with birthday money, and practiced his marksmanship. He drove the 80 miles to Charleston several times on scouting missions. He was ready to take his war from the internet to the real world, and he had chosen one of the most sacred battlegrounds imaginable. The 12 people who welcomed Dylann Roof into their Bible study on June 17th represented the pillars of their community. Their leader was the Reverend Clementa Pinckney, 41 years old. He was a towering figure in every sense, a gifted orator, a devoted husband and father of two, and a public servant who had been elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives at just 23, and later to the state Senate. He was a man who moved with ease between the worlds of faith and politics, believing each could inform and elevate the other. His work was his calling, and he was deeply beloved for his wisdom and gentle authority. Sitting near him was Susie Jackson, 87, the eldest victim. She was a church matriarch, a member of Mother Emanuel for decades, and a vibrant, active presence. She sang in the choir and served on the trustee board. She was the loving core of a massive extended family, a grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother. She was known for her generosity, her sharp wit, and her impeccable style, often seen in one of her many elegant church hats. Ethel Lance, 70, was another long-serving pillar of the church. She was a sexton, a caretaker of the physical building, a job she performed with immense pride for more than 30 years. She was the one who kept the brass polished and the floors gleaming. She was a mother of 5 and a grandmother who was described as the glue that held her family together, her voice a constant source of encouragement and love. Cynthia Graham Hurd, 54, was a librarian for the Charleston County Public Library System. For 31 years, she had dedicated her life to books and community, managing several branches and believing deeply in the power of education and access to information. Her brother was a former state senator, and like Reverend Pinckney, she understood the importance of civic engagement. Myra Thompson, 59, was a retired middle school teacher and guidance counselor. She was leading the Bible study that night, a role she cherished. She was a woman of deep faith, actively involved in the church and devoted to her family. DePayne Middleton Doctor, 49, was a mother of 4 daughters and a respected admissions coordinator at Southern Wesleyan University. She had a powerful, beautiful singing voice and was a cherished member of the church choir. She was known for her devotion to her children and her unwavering faith. Sharonda Coleman Singleton, 45, was a speech pathologist, a high school track coach, and a reverend at the church. She was a woman of boundless energy, a mentor to countless students, and a devoted mother to her 3 children. Her son, Chris Singleton, was a promising college baseball player, and she was his biggest fan. Daniel Simmons, 74, was a retired pastor from another church who attended Bible study at Mother Emanuel with his friend Reverend Pinckney. He was a decorated military veteran who had served in Vietnam. After his service, he dedicated his life to the ministry. He was a man of quiet strength and profound faith. And then there was Tywanza Sanders, 26, the youngest victim. He was a 2014 graduate of Allen University with a degree in business administration. He was an aspiring poet and rapper, a young man brimming with talent and dreams for the future. He was there that night with his great-aunt, Susie Jackson. He was bright, charismatic, and deeply loved. These 9 individuals, along with 3 survivors, were the ones who offered a Bible and a seat to the stranger in their midst. For nearly an hour, they shared their space and their faith with the man who had come to execute them. The topic of the Bible study was the parable of the sower, from Mark 4, a story about a farmer who scatters seeds. Some seeds fall on hard paths and are eaten by birds, some on rocky ground where they can't take root, some among thorns that choke them out, but some fall on good soil where they grow and produce a bountiful harvest. It is a story about the different ways people receive a message of faith and love. As the discussion drew to a close, they bowed their heads in prayer, their eyes shut. This was the moment Ruth had been waiting for. He stood up, pulled the Glock .45 from his fanny pack and took aim. The worshippers, hearing the noise, opened their eyes. Reverend Pinckney was the first target. Tywanza Sanders, the brave young man, stood up and tried to talk him down. He asked Roof why he was doing this. "I have to do it," Roof replied, his voice flat and cold. "You rape our women and you're taking over our country. And you have to go." Sanders reportedly tried to shield his great-aunt Susie Jackson with his own body. He told Roof, "You don't have to do this." Roof's response was chilling. "Y'all are killing us," he said, and began to fire. The scene descended into unimaginable horror. Roof moved through the room methodically, firing dozens of rounds. He reloaded his weapon multiple times, callously targeting the elderly and the young alike. The air filled with the sounds of gunfire, screams, and prayers. In his confession later, he would admit he was surprised that his first shots didn't immediately send everyone into a panic. Instead, they dove under the tables where they were studying. He had to hunt them down. Felicia Sanders, Tywanza's mother, survived by lying on the floor clutching her 11-year-old granddaughter and smearing herself in the blood of her loved ones playing dead. She told her granddaughter to do the same, whispering to her that she loved her, preparing for the end. She would later testify that she watched her son, Tywanza, die as he tried to protect his great-aunt. Roof walked over to where another woman, Polly Shepard, was hiding under a table, praying aloud. He put the gun to her head and asked, "Did I shoot you yet?" She replied, "No." He then told her something that revealed the calculated, performative nature of his crime. "I'm not going to," he said. "I'm going to leave you here to tell the story." He wanted a witness. He wanted his message of hate to be broadcast. After firing 77 rounds, he turned and walked out of the church, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation. 9 people were dead. 3 had survived, but their lives and the life of their city would be forever changed. The seeds of hate that Dylann Roof had sown in that room were intended to choke out all hope. He could never have predicted what kind of soil they had actually landed on. The first 911 call came at 9:05 p.m. The operator heard whispers and muffled sounds of terror. The massive law enforcement response was immediate, but by the time officers breached the doors of the fellowship hall, the gunman was long gone. They found a scene of carnage that defied comprehension. The Bibles and study sheets were scattered across the floor, stained with blood. The bodies of the 9 victims lay where they had fallen. The initial hours were a blur of chaos and grief. As news of a shooting at a historic black church spread, a crowd of family members, fellow worshipers, and concerned citizens gathered outside, held back by yellow police tape. Their prayers and hymns filled the night air, a somber, defiant soundtrack to the flashing blue and red lights. Investigators quickly pieced together the initial facts. Survivors Felicia Sanders and Polly Shepard gave a description of the shooter. A young, slender white man with sandy blonde hair in a bowl cut, wearing a gray sweatshirt. Critically, he had left the church in a black Hyundai Elantra. Within hours, police had located and released surveillance footage of the suspect and his vehicle entering the church. The images were grainy, but they were enough. The manhunt for Dylann Roof was on. As the sun rose on June 18th, the nation awoke to the horrifying news from Charleston. The identities of the victims, including a beloved state senator, sent shockwaves through the country. The racial motivation was immediately clear, and the act was widely condemned as domestic terrorism. The first major break in the case came not from police work, but from Roof's own family. His uncle, Carson Cowles, saw the surveillance image on the news and recognized his nephew. He then saw the image of the car and knew it was the one Dylann drove. His heart sank. After a frantic call to Roof's father, who confirmed Dylann owned a .45 caliber pistol, Cowles made the difficult decision to call the police. "I'm his uncle," he told the dispatcher. "He's a little monster." This positive identification transformed the manhunt. Police now had a name, a face, and a license plate number. They issued a nationwide alert for Dylann Roof and his vehicle. They knew he was armed and extremely dangerous. Roof, meanwhile, was driving north away from Charleston. He used his debit card at a gas station, creating a digital breadcrumb for law enforcement to follow. He drove through the night and into the next day, his destination unclear. He likely believed he had successfully sparked the chaos he craved. The final, crucial tip came from an ordinary citizen, a woman named Debbie Dills. Dills, a florist from Shelby, North Carolina, was driving to work that morning when she spotted a black Hyundai with South Carolina plates. She noticed the driver's distinctive haircut and thought he looked nervous. Something felt wrong. She pulled up alongside the car and got a better look. It was him. Her heart pounded in her chest. She pulled away, called her boss to confirm the suspect's name and car description, and then dialed 911. For the next 30 miles, she became an unlikely hero, tailing Roof's car from a safe distance, staying on the line with the dispatcher, providing a real-time location as police scrambled to intercept. Her courage and clear-headedness were instrumental. Finally, in Shelby, North Carolina, about 245 miles from Charleston, police cruisers swarmed the vehicle and pulled Roof over. He surrendered without a fight. Inside the car, they found the Glock pistol used in the massacre. The manhunt, which had lasted for 14 agonizing hours, was over. In his police interrogation, recorded on video, Roof was calm, lucid, and chillingly cooperative. He laughed at times as he confessed to the entire crime in meticulous detail. He admitted he had researched Mother Emanuel online and chosen it specifically to make a statement. He explained his racist ideology, telling investigators he felt he had to do it because, in his view, black people were killing white people every day. He showed no remorse. He said he had a cold heart, and expressed a strange sense of disappointment that he hadn't killed more people. He told them he had brought 7 extra magazines, each loaded with 11 bullets, giving him a total of 88 rounds, a number significant in neo-Nazi circles, with H being the 8th letter of the alphabet, making 88 an abbreviation for Heil Hitler. The confession erased any doubt about his guilt or his motive. The case against him was now airtight, but the legal proceedings would soon be eclipsed by an event in the courtroom that no one could have predicted. 2 days after the massacre, on June 19th, Dylann Roof appeared for his initial bond hearing. He stood before the judge via a video feed from the county jail, flanked by 2 guards, his face a blank, emotionless mask. It was in this sterile, formal setting that the world witnessed the first and perhaps most powerful, unintended consequence of his act of hate. The judge invited family members of the victims to address the court, and to address Roof directly. One by one they stepped forward, their voices thick with fresh, unimaginable grief. But what they said was not what the world, or Dylann Roof, expected to hear. They did not speak of vengeance or retribution. They spoke of God, and they spoke of forgiveness. Nadine Collier, the daughter of 70-year-old Ethel Lance, was one of the first to speak. Through tears, she looked at the image of her mother's killer on the screen. "I will never be able to hold her again," she said, her voice breaking. "But I forgive you. You hurt me. You hurt a lot of people. But God forgives you, and I forgive you." Then came the son of Myra Thompson. "I forgive you," he said simply. Felicia Sanders, who had survived by hiding her granddaughter and playing dead while her own son Tywanza bled to death nearby, also spoke. "We have no room for hating," she declared. "So we have to forgive. I pray God on your soul." The procession of grace was stunning. It was a raw, spontaneous, and profoundly Christian response to an act of supreme evil. These were not prepared statements. They were the immediate, heartfelt expressions of a community whose faith was so deeply ingrained that forgiveness was not a choice, but a spiritual reflex. This moment of grace, broadcast live around the world, fundamentally shifted the narrative. Dylann Roof had wanted to be a symbol of white rage, the catalyst for a race war. Instead, the families of his victims transformed him into a symbol of something else entirely, the impotency of hate in the face of radical love and faith. The display of forgiveness was complex and not universally embraced. Many observers, particularly outside the black church tradition, struggled to understand it. Some saw it as a powerful act of defiance, a refusal to let Roof's hate poison their own hearts. Others worried it let white America off the hook, offering absolution too quickly without a true reckoning with the systemic racism that produced a Dylann Roof in the first place. But for those in the courtroom, it was a necessary act of self-preservation, a way to reclaim their humanity from a man who had tried to strip it away. The legal process moved forward on two tracks, state and federal. South Carolina prosecutors charged him with 9 counts of murder and sought the death penalty, but the federal government under the Department of Justice took the lead, indicting Roof on 33 counts, including hate crimes resulting in death and obstruction of religious practice. The federal trial was a near certainty to end in a death sentence, and it allowed the government to frame the crime for what it was, an act of domestic terrorism aimed at the foundational rights of its citizens. Before the trial, Roof's competency to stand trial was questioned. He was evaluated by psychiatrists and, despite a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and anxiety, he was found competent. The most bizarre and contentious aspect of the pretrial phase was Roof's insistence on representing himself. Against the strenuous advice of his world-class defense attorneys, including David Bruck, one of the nation's foremost experts on capital defense, Roof chose to act as his own lawyer for key parts of the trial. His motive was clear. He wanted to prevent his lawyers from presenting any evidence that might portray him as mentally ill. In his mind, this would undermine his political and racial motivations. He did not want to be seen as crazy. He wanted to be seen as a sane, clear-eyed racial warrior. He was willing to sacrifice his life to protect his ideology. The federal trial began in December 2016. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Nathan Williams, presented a meticulous and emotionally devastating case. The jury heard the chilling 911 call from Polly Shepard, with the sound of gunshots echoing in the background. They saw Roof's videotaped confession, where he laughed while admitting to the murders. They saw the photos from his website and read the hateful words of his manifesto. The most powerful moments came from the survivors. Polly Shepard recounted Roof's words to her, how he had spared her to tell the story. Felicia Sanders delivered harrowing testimony about watching her son die, her voice trembling but strong as she described shielding her granddaughter from the bullets. The prosecution built a mountain of evidence that was simply irrefutable. Roof, acting as his own counsel for the guilt phase, did almost nothing. He made no opening statement and called no witnesses. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all 33 counts. The sentencing phase was where Roof's bizarre legal strategy became fully apparent. He again took over as his own lawyer. His goal was not to save his own life, but to ensure no mitigating evidence about his family history or mental state was ever presented. He gave a brief opening statement, telling the jury, "There is nothing wrong with me psychologically." The prosecution then presented more heart-wrenching testimony from the victims' families, who spoke about the immense voids left by the loss of their parents, spouses, and children. When it was his turn, Roof presented no evidence and called no witnesses. For his closing argument, he spoke for just a few minutes. He expressed no remorse. He did not ask for life in prison. Instead, he doubled down on his hateful beliefs. "I still feel like I had to do it," he told the jury. On January 10, 2017, the jury of 9 white and 3 black citizens sentenced Dylann Roof to death. He became the first person in American history to be sentenced to death for a federal hate crime. He was sent to federal death row in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he remains today, an unrepentant ideologue confined to a cell, his war having ended before it even began. Dylann Roof's goal was to be a historical figure, a catalyst who would be remembered for starting a revolution. In a way, he succeeded, but the revolution he started was the opposite of the one he intended. His act of terror was designed to fracture American society along racial lines, to deepen divisions, and inspire others to his cause. It failed spectacularly. The immediate aftermath was not violence and retribution, but vigils, marches for unity, and a national conversation about race and history. The grace shown by the victims' families set a tone that reverberated across the country. But the most concrete, most lasting, and most ironic legacy of Dylann Roof's crime was the downfall of the very symbol he used to broadcast his hate, the Confederate battle flag. For over 50 years, the Confederate flag had flown on the grounds of the South Carolina state capitol in Columbia. For decades, its presence was a source of bitter controversy. To its supporters, it was a symbol of Southern heritage and ancestral pride. To its opponents, it was a painful, ever-present reminder of slavery, segregation, and the violent history of white supremacy, a symbol of treason and racial oppression. The flag was a political third rail, and numerous attempts to remove it had failed. But Dylann Roof changed the political calculus overnight. The photographs of him posing with the flag, brandishing it as a weapon alongside his pistol, inextricably linked the symbol to his act of racist terrorism. He had weaponized it, and in doing so, he had made its continued official sanction by the state of South Carolina politically and morally indefensible. In the days following the massacre, a powerful bipartisan chorus rose up, demanding the flag's removal. Governor Nikki Haley, a Republican who had previously defended the flag's presence, reversed her position in an emotional press conference. That flag, while an integral part of our past, does not represent the future of our great state, she declared. The debate moved to the state legislature, where it was met with fierce resistance from some conservative lawmakers. But the tide of public opinion was overwhelming. Activist Bree Newsom scaled the flagpole and removed the flag herself in a dramatic act of civil disobedience that galvanized the movement. On July 9, 2015, just 22 days after the massacre, the South Carolina House of Representatives voted to take it down. The next day, an honor guard ceremoniously lowered the Confederate battle flag from the State House grounds for the last time. It was sent to a museum to be relegated from a symbol of present-day government to an artifact of history. This was the ultimate anatomy of Dylann Roof's failed hate. He chose a gun to write a message of division, but the response was written in a language of grace he could never comprehend. He wrapped himself in a flag to inspire a race war, but his actions led directly to that same flag being lowered in defeat. He sought to terrorize a community into submission, but instead, he revealed its boundless strength. He wanted his victims to be symbols of weakness. They became eternal symbols of courage and love. He wanted to be remembered as a warrior, but he will be remembered as a catalyst for the removal of the very emblem he cherished. The empty space on the flagpole in Columbia, South Carolina, is a more enduring monument than his hateful manifesto will ever be. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.